when it comes to parenting our children, it's a very good idea to make sure that we also know how to parent ourselves. Because if we are to use only the role model of the parents that we've had, then what we will do is just become a mirror image of them. So we will hear ourselves talking exactly the way our mother or our father spoke to us. And as we're trying to parent our child, we may be very happy with that, but we may find that it doesn't actually work very well. And then, because nobody has ever shown us another way of doing it, we don't really have a role model on which to base our experience, to base our methods, to base our choices about what we do. When we are learning how to parent our own children, it is crucial at that time to learn how to parent ourselves. And the reason that it's important for us to know how to parent ourselves all links to that inner voice in your head, the self-talk that goes on throughout the day, where you listen to the voice in your head, which tells you what to do, what to say, what to think, what actions to take. And also, it tells you how successful you are, how much of a failure you are, how hopeless you are, how fat you are, how ugly you are, whatever. That voice in our head is our inner critic. It's the voice that we heard from very young. It's not the words that we heard, but the tone of the voice that we heard. We heard, as we were parented ourselves as children, a voice which was either criticizing, demanding, cajoling, motivating, humiliating, derogatory. That's the voice and many other experiences of it, of course. Whichever way your parents spoke to you as a child, then your inner voice, that voice in your head, will speak to you in the same way. Now that's helpful, or it's not very helpful. It really does depend. But at a time when you are trying to parent your own child, it isn't very helpful to hear the voice that parented you. Because what's actually happening at that moment, in those moments of time, is that you are no longer the adult parenting a child, but now you have become the child. So you are now a child trying to parent your own child. And depending on whichever age you have chosen to be as the child, your own child may well be a little bit older than you now. So if, for example, you experienced a traumatic incident at the age of 3, and you remember the voice that you heard at that time, which was blaming, which was derogatory and humiliating to you, then you are going to be stuck at that age when you are trying to parent your own child in a stressful situation. Now, none of this matters as long as we keep ourselves very calm and very cool. But as parents, you probably know that doesn't always happen, that your child has the ability to trigger you into your stress response. The stress response, otherwise known as the fight and flight or freeze response, is a physiological reaction in your body. Your body reacts in a certain way by pumping out different hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, all aimed at keeping you very safe. So as that physiological response happens in your body, one of the aspects of it is that your frontal cortex of your brain is actually deoxygenated. The blood doesn't flow to that center of your brain. And that is the part of the brain that before you're 7 years old hasn't developed. It remains undeveloped. So what you are in is a totally habitual response, the response that you learned when you were a child, of how to handle stressful, fearful, fight and flight, stress responses. You can either fight, you can run, you can freeze. But they're your 3 choices. There are no others. And your body reacts in a physiological way accordingly. So, if you are to fight, it's not very helpful for your brain to begin to reason out why this is a good idea or why it's not a good idea. That's the part of the reasoning brain which developed at 7 years of age. So, immediately, you are now in a stress response. Then the frontal lobe of the brain, the reasoning part of the brain that can regulate your impulses and regulate your emotional outbursts, is no longer functioning. And that is why when you are in a stressful situation, parenting your child, if you go into the stress response, you are back to before 7 years of age with your responses. Creative thinking is no longer available to you, just reaction. And that reaction can be very, very dramatic. It can be either you need to fight this situation or you need to get away from this situation as fast as possible, or you freeze and don't know what to do. What you will experience at those moments is that something will come out of your mouth, but when you listen to it, you will think, oh my goodness, I sound just like my mother, or I sound just like my father. And that can either be inspirational or it can be devastation, because the reaction that they showed you is the reaction you will show them, to your children. So the secret to parenting your child is to learn to parent yourself, to make sure that the inner voice in your own head is actually a nice voice, a voice which says, you're doing a great job here, a nice voice which says, yes, that's the way to do it, encouraging, motivational, inspirational. That's the voice which you need in your head. And the only person now to do that is you, for yourself, so that your inner voice becomes the new voice, which is of far more use to you than the other one. And your children are therefore able to be parented by an adult rather than a child.